The raise was just small enough for me to peel and see a turn. The turn came the 5 of clubs. Boom. Right away I hit the wheel. Obviously 6-7 is still in his range and makes the nut straight, but for what he has behind, I'm never getting away. So when he decides to shove for the rest of it, for a total of 15k, of course I make the snap call. It's been over a decade since I traveled to Europe. Last time it was for sightseeing. This time it's the battle. So here I am in Prague, Czech Republic. This is my first time competing on this side of the world. I've arrived at the World Series of Poker Europe, and my goal is to bring home one of these coveted gold bracelets. Some of Europe's top players, together with other accomplished pros from all around the globe, have gathered here at Kings Casino Prague inside the Hilton. So after getting some rest from my long flight, I was ready to jump right into their 5,300 euro main event with a 10 million euro guarantee. Registration was super easy through their WSOP mobile app. Out of their 3 starting flights, I just finished registering for flight B. Let's head to table 134. Once I got settled in, I looked around and didn't recognize anyone. Mostly a good mix of European and American players, but note that the app definitely helps you get familiar with the players on your table, since you can quickly check who you're up against, as well as any recent cashes they've had at WSOP. Starting stack is 60,000 in chips. Blinds are 100, 200, 60-minute levels. I'm in the cutoff, and the very second hand I get dealt at this table, I look down at pocket aces. I raise it up to 600, the small blind calls, and the big blind gets out of the way. We go heads up to the flop of Jack of Hearts, 9 of Hearts, 7 of Diamonds. This is a very wet board, all kinds of straight draws and flush draws. He decides to lead out for 1100. With this very dynamic board and a lot of dangerous runouts, I decided to just call. The turn comes the 4 of clubs. He thinks about it for a bit and now decides to lead again. And for the same amount, 1100. And here I think is where I make a pretty big mistake. I decided to just call again, which I think is really too conservative. With a very safe turn card here, my opponent could be betting all kinds of hands that I'm far ahead of. Any jack, any 9, any hard draw, any pair with a straight draw. By not raising this turn, I'm allowing my opponent to see the river cheaply. The river comes the Jack of clubs. If he was betting a pair of jacks, I am now behind. He decides to bet 3,200. Based on this line he took, I think it is very likely that he could have a jack, but also a lot of draws have missed, and it is level 1 of the tournament. At this stage, it's still very cheap to buy information. I throw in the call and he turns over King Jack. We do see that I lost a lot of value by not raising the turn, even though in this case he probably wouldn't have folded and I might have lost a bigger pot. Next hand, I look down at Jack 10 of clubs. I'm in the cutoff. The blinds are now 200, 300. There's a raise from the low jack to 800. I make the call. It folds around to the blinds. The small blind gets out of the way. And the big blind decides to 3-bet to 4,200. The low jack thinks about it for a bit and decides to call, getting great pot odds and playing in position, and with Jack 10 suited being one of my favorite hands. Folding here would be an absolute crime. I put in the call as well. The flop comes King of Hearts, 9 of Hearts, 7 of clubs. So I flopped a double gut shot straight draw as well as a backdoor flush draw. The big blind makes a c-bet of 4,000. The low jack thinks for a bit and decides to put in the call. Now there are 2 hearts on the board, so I do have to be aware that not all of my outs are completely clean. I could make my hand and still lose to a flush, but both my straight draws are drawing to the nuts. I put in the call as well. The turn comes the ace of clubs, now also giving me a backdoor flush draw. The big blind now goes for a large bet of 15,000. Low jack quickly folds. The big blind had about 35k back. I'm not getting great pot odds to make the call here, but I do have such a huge draw. And being in position, if I hit one of my outs, I can ensure that another bet goes in. I do put in the call. The river is a beautiful sight, the 6 of clubs. The pot is huge. I've made my backdoor flush. With the line he's taken, he's representing a very strong hand, and it doesn't look like he's gonna check. And here I am sitting here just trying to look calm and thinking, please go all in. Of course, I make the snap call, and he turns over Jack 10 of spades, which was actually pretty surprising. I wasn't expecting him to have the same hand, I was free rolling him with the flush draw on the turn. And so just like that, I win a full starting stack, right on level 2. I did get very lucky here to hit my hand on the river. If the river came a blank and he shoved, he just wins the pot. So I actually don't mind the way he decided to play his hand, starting from pre-flop, taking the initiative, rather than just calling, as I think most players would do on level 2 of the main event. Play at the WSOPE like in Rozadov?
Been there once.
I never been there, so, but I heard this is much nicer. I'm just chatting with my neighbor to my right, and we were talking about how WSOPE used to be at Rozadov for many years, which is located on the border of Czech Republic and Germany. And from what I've heard, it's a tiny village, and so there really isn't much to do there if you bust out of a tournament. So for the World Series to move to Prague this year, that's actually a huge upgrade, as Prague is probably known to be one of the most beautiful cities in the world, with plenty to do and see. But with that said, sightseeing will have to wait. We've got to focus on the task at hand, which is to try to win this tournament. So the blinds are up now, 200, 400. I'm in the big blind this time, and I look down at pocket aces again. It's crazy how sometimes you can go forever without ever seeing aces, and then suddenly seem to get them so easily. So there's an open raise from the player to my left under the gun to 1000. It folds around to my neighbor to my right, who I was just having that nice chat with before this hand. He's in the small blind and decides to 3-bet to 4000. What a great spot having aces here. The small blind is 3-betting the player under the gun, so I'm expecting his range to be quite strong. I put in the 4-bet to 10,000. The player under the gun gets out of the way, and the small blind decides to make the call. We go to the flop of Jack of Spades, 6 of clubs, 7 of clubs. The small blind checks, and I decide to put in a c-bet for 9k. I can start extracting value from a lot of hands like other pocket pairs, pocket 8s through pocket 10s. Also the board is quite draw heavy. Without the ace of clubs, it does increase the probability of him having clubs. He thinks about it for a bit and decides to call. The turn is the 8 of hearts, and now here's where the hand gets interesting. He decides to put out a small bet of 6k. I really didn't know what to make of this. Normally against the caller's range, the 8 does hit his range more than mine. However, he was the original 3-better pre-flop, and I really didn't want to make the same mistake I did the first time I had aces earlier, where I just called the small turn bet, allowing my opponent to see a cheap river. If he had a hand like pocket 9s, pocket 10s, it's quite possible that he's doing this to try to control the size of the pot and stop me from betting more. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility of him having a set and be trying to induce a raise, but there's still a lot more combination of hands I'm ahead of. I decide to put in the raise to 25k.
It's 25.
Put in.
So he decides to shove over my raise. I make the call. He turns over 5-6 of hearts. He does have a lot of outs and a big sigh of relief as he breaks out. So I end up winning this massive pot, as his jam was for 68,500 over my raise to 25k on the turn. It was a big shove, but I did make up my mind that I was calling if he jammed.
For the vlog!
For the vlog, that one's making it for sure.
For the vlog!
Thank you for contributing to the vlog. It is nice to see him being able to joke around with me despite busting out of the tournament. Of course, nobody is taking it personally, as trying to bluff and bust each other is an essential part of the game. I counted on my stack. I had around 194,000 after this pot. Of course, we're still only a few levels into this tournament, and having a huge stack isn't as useful as it is in the later stages, but I can't deny it. It still felt awesome to win 2 huge pots and get an early chip lead. Next hand, blinds are up, 300, 500. I look down at pocket 6s in the hijack. Everybody folds to me. I open to 1200. It folds to the big blind, who makes the call. We go heads up to the flop of Jack of Spades, 6 of hearts, 10 of clubs. Looks like I'm on a heater as I flop bottom set. It almost feels too easy today. The big blind checks and I make a c-bet for 2200. There's lots of hands on this board that the big blind's range can connect with, including lots of combos of gut shot straight draws. He does decide to put in the call. The turn comes the ace of diamonds. The big blind checks. And now this is an interesting card. It does improve king queen to the nut straight, and it's also a card that favors my range more than the big blinds. If he is calling with just one pair on the flop, this card does kill my action. However, he could also have a lot of hands like queen jack, king 10, all the combinations of a pair and a straight draw that could get sticky on the turn. I decided to go for a second bet of 4,000. He thinks about it for a bit and decides to check raise to 11,000. King queen is definitely a possibility now, and just with all the action that happened so far on this table today, with me busting 2 people, I really didn't think that this guy was messing around. But if he does really have the straight, I still have outs to a full house. I make the call. The river is the king of diamonds, now putting a one-liner on the board. Any queen now makes the straight. He decides to make a bet for 12,000, a very small bet compared to the pot. This is a really underbluffed line. It's also just tough for him to bet into me on this river, on this run out, as I could have the queen. So I decided that he just doesn't have enough bluffs here. Congratulations, sir. You made the vlog. So after I folded, he flashes his cards to me, and sure enough, he had king queen for the nut straight. So the river actually made it easier for me to fold. Would have been a tough decision if the river was a blank and he fired big. You won the closer? Oh wow. That was the Vegas or? Oh nice. So I hadn't gotten involved with the player in seat 4, but it turns out he's a WSOP bracelet winner. His name is Lucas Zasconi, and he took down the event called The Closer at the 2025 WSOP Las Vegas, which is one of the last no-limit events of the series. How much was the price for that? Oh, that's pretty good for last tournament.
1,500 bucks.
Yeah, it's good.
2 flights, 3 buys, 1,500. So
Oh wow. Yeah. He ends up getting it all in pre-flop with kings against ace-king, but gets very unlucky when the ace hits the river. And then very soon after, he's all in pre-flop again, and against the same player. This time he has queens and runs into kings. It's crazy because those are the only 2 hands that I saw him play. I guess even champions are not immune to super coolers. Good game, man.
GG. Good luck, guys.
Blinds are up, 300, 600. I'm in the big blind with king 10 offsuit. There's a raise from the cutoff to 1,500. It falls to the small blind, who gets out of the way, and I put in the call. We go heads up to the flop of 8 of spades, jack of spades, 4 of clubs. I check it over to my opponent, who makes a c-bet of 1,200, holding the king of spades and a backdoor straight draw, and with king high possibly being ahead, I put in the call. The turn is the 7 of spades, just the card I was looking for, as it puts a 3rd spade on the board and now gives me a gut shot straight draw to the 9. I am blocking 9-10 for the nuts, and having a spade also makes it less likely he has combos that can continue. I decide to put in a lead here for 4,000. He thinks about it for a bit and does decide to put in the call. The river is the 3 of spades, now putting a 4th spade on the board and giving me the king high flush. Now against this specific opponent, just from my read on the way he carried himself, he definitely looked very capable, and so I thought that a small bet might induce a raise, while a standard sized bet would likely just get him to fold most of the weaker hands that I beat. For example, if he just had top pair with no spade or a pair of 8s, facing a small river bet, he might feel the need to turn his hand to a bluff. So I put out a bet of 6k. He thinks about it for a bit, looks back at his hole cards, and eventually does decide to put in the raise. He raises it to 22,500, so quite a large raise. I lose to only the ace of spades, and there's not even that many combos of the naked ace of spades that would bet the flop. If he already had the ace high flush on the turn, he trapped me well. I put in the call, and he turns over ace of spades, 9 of diamonds. Wow, I was actually pretty surprised to see that he had it, and now seeing his hand, it does make sense that he bet the flop, as he has a hand that's similar to mine, with both backdoor flush and straight draws. Even facing this river raise, I think this was a tough hand to get away from with the second nuts heads up. I'm actually pretty curious if you guys would have played this hand differently. Feel free to leave your comments on this one. Love to hear your thoughts. I was calling any amount. I said please raise, please raise. Next hand, I'm on the button and look down at ace deuce offsuit. everybody folds to me, and I make a raise to 1800. Small blind folds, and the big blind makes the call. The flop comes 9 of spades, 3 of clubs, 4 of diamonds. The big blind checks. This board hits the big blind's range quite hard, but I do have a gutter to the wheel, plus the overcard to the ace. I throw in a c-bet for 2000. My opponent thinks about it for a bit and decides to check raise to 5000. Facing this raise, he knows my range is quite wide, so he could be check raising here with a variety of hands. There's a lot of straight draws like 5-6, 6-7. He had about 20k behind, which is 25 big blinds, not very deep, but the raise was just small enough for me to peel and see a turn. The turn came the 5 of clubs. Boom. Right away I hit the wheel. Obviously 6-7 is still in his range and makes the nut straight, but for what he has behind, I'm never getting away. So when he decides to shove for the rest of it, for a total of 15k, of course I make the snap call, and he ends up turning over Jack 9. Again, I got pretty lucky. He's drawing dead. The river is an inconsequential 7 of clubs, and just like that, I busted another player at this table. I have to say, it's been quite a strong start to day 1 of this WSOPE main event. It looks like registering on time instead of jumping in late definitely seems to be paying off, as I've been on the right end of some very big pots, which has put me in a really strong position early on. And the huge advantage that comes with that is that I'm now able to utilize my stack to apply pressure on many of the shorter stacks and dictate the action a lot more. But day 1 is far from over. Our table breaks soon after this hand, still have a few more levels to play, and we all know that everything can change in a single hand. For now, the momentum is still on my side, but can I carry it for the rest of day 1 and into day 2? Will I keep surviving to have a chance to bring home a bracelet here in Prague? We'll find out in the next episode. 喜欢我的影片，不要忘记按赞、订阅、打开小铃铛。